Tootin' rootin' tootin' tootin' rootin' toot rootin' toot. Hi, listener, and welcome back to another episode of Coco and Daltz. I'm already down on this episode because listener Coco was shaking her head at me as I was doing the intro music.
I think we should start over.
I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Daltz.
We are doing real reviews. We're real people. And Coco, what are we doing in this episode today?
In this episode, we are doing the brand new Netflix original not really a docu-series. It's a limited series based on the true story of Charles Sobrage, who was apparently known as the Serpent. That is the name of the limited series, the Serpent. Charles Sobrage was a notorious serial killer in Asia during the 70s, apparently completely undetected until one dogged Dutch diplomat.
Oh,
how you like that alliteration?
Alliteration.
Yeah.
Early in the podcast.
I was an English major listener, so I'm down with the alliteration. Dogged Dutch diplomat Knippenberg came across the case of a couple of dead Dutch tourists in Bangkok. That's where he was stationed in the 70s, and kind of nobody was taking the case seriously. So he investigated and uncovered this web of crime that Charles Sobrage, a.k.a. Alain Gauthier,
a.k.a. the Serpent,
committed with his girlfriend, his Quebecois girlfriend, and an Indian sidekick. And so this is an 8-episode series. Each episode is an hour long, all about the Serpent's reign of terror in Bangkok and Nepal and India and Hong Kong and other places, and kind of the investigation into him, and then how he evaded capture for so long, and then how he was eventually sort of brought to justice. Mm-hmm. So, got anything to add to the summary, Daltz?
No, I mean, you always do the great summaries, Coco, and that one was just another example of greatness.
I know you're trying to get some action.
So this was, like Coco said, 8 episodes, 8 hours of TV. We just watched that, listener.
And we pounded out 8 hours in just under 24 hours, actually.
Well, and we binge watched it, so you don't have to.
So tell us what you think about this.
So Coco hit all the high spots, and there's a lot of nefarious, funny business in there. The diplomat is constantly frustrated at the lack of attention that these cases are being paid. He is frustrated at many number of things.
Yeah.
And
he's wound pretty tight.
And I didn't think the Dutch were wound tight people. So this is breaking stereotypes for me.
They got all that pot. So
right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I thought they were kind of loose.
Bangkok.
Right.
So
in the 70s.
Right.
So this Netflix special is, to me, sort of evidence of we are getting toward the bottom of the pandemic barrel, because this is being touted and pushed ahead and lauded on Netflix. And I just think it's not something we would be paying attention to, I think, in regular times when regular productions were going ahead. It's just one of those foreign productions. So I think
in other words, you'd be in the theaters watching Godzilla vs. Kong this weekend and not watching an 8-episode Netflix series about a South Asian serial killer.
So the story is compelling. The story is really, really compelling.
Yeah, that it is.
So there's this guy, like Coco said, who's, got nefarious. He's a gem dealer for some random reason. Not a drug dealer, not an arms dealer, but a gem dealer in Southeast Asia. And manages to steal passports from people and then go abroad with these stolen gems and fence them and get big money.
Apparently a master passport forger, because the American diplomat who was called in to inspect the forged American passport was like, well, if it's fake, it's really good. I can't tell it's not real. So. And
so it's worth saying as well that this is an international production, so there's lots of cooks in this kitchen.
Yeah.
Obviously, is filmed in Thailand. A lot of Thai officials involved, a lot of Thai actors, English, Australian, Pakistan, India, American maybe. I'm not quite sure how legitimate that American guy was. But there's all sorts of entities involved here. And you can tell usually what happens with these kinds of productions where it's like, okay, Netflix is having a brainstorming meeting. It's like, let's get something and involve everybody who's got a Netflix account. And let's get them involved. Like, let's get everybody in the Netflix global empire involved with this particular one, and it'll be win-win, and everybody will play it. Because there's French on there, there's a lot of different languages, a lot of different subtitles. They even managed to squeeze in the fact that one of the co-conspirators is a Canadian, so you've got that market covered.
And it was really funny too because there was one Canadian diplomat who was kind of an a-hole,
right?
And Knippenberg let him have it, and I'm like, wow, you don't usually see Canadians being villainized.
He was coming in. He was sort of like just almost the same as the American guy coming in.
Right.
It's like, totally. Wait a minute, if the Canadian diplomat's coming in, he's going, how can I help you? Eh?
Right,
like,
totally.
I think I have a pretty good sense of how this would go. You'd be like, oh, geez, let's help you.
Right. The Canadians aren't usually the ones who are the bad guys.
Or the stonewallers.
Yeah. So that was like, what?
Yeah. That was an unrealistic moment. And I think what we should address the elephant in the room, Coco, is the acting was horrific.
It totally was. I would especially like to give a shout out to Ellie Bamber as Angela Knippenberg and Billy Howell as Herman Knippenberg as two terrible actors.
So they're Razzie-worth, are they?
Yes, they were really... So...
And she played a German in this one.
Yeah,
so there's another, perhaps, Netflix market that's involved.
So the first 10 to 15 minutes of the first episode... I was like, oh, they're actually trying to make this look as though it were actually filmed in the 70s. It's kind of got that not HD gritty feel to it.
Yep.
And
the music.
Yeah, I was really into it. And then suddenly...
And some of the footage looked like it was originally from Southeast Asia in the 70s.
And then suddenly, after about 15 minutes, the Knippenberg guy appears, and it was just like the record scratch, like it just anytime the German lady and the Dutch guy were on screen, it was just a bad soap opera. And soap operas usually aren't master classes in thespianism anyways, but those two were especially bad. So they just took me straight out of it.
I felt bad because there's so much potential here. The production value was really high. So we not only had the really good grainy 70s video that went along with, the Bangkok in the 70s. That was a really cool shot. They had Hong Kong in the 70s, I believe, like some real authentic
and,
footage.
Delhi and Mumbai.
Yeah, all these places they went to, they had authentic, like just B-roll. But obviously the actors are not walking there or not CGI'd onto a screen with that in the background. It was actually legit footage. It was really good. And the wardrobes are good.
Yeah.
The haircuts were authentic. Like, I believed all that stuff. I believed everything around it. The soundtrack was good. Not only the
soundtrack was amazing.
Not only the music that you're used to hearing in these kinds of 70s movies, but also I thought the original music in the soundtrack was really good too. So a lot of this stuff was, and the story is bang on, cool, awesome for this kind of thing. As again, we want to reiterate, people's deaths are not entertaining in any way, shape, or form, but retelling a story like this, you think you've got all sorts of potential. And the elevator pitch for this series, I imagine, was green lighted immediately by Netflix, especially if they're going to involve every Netflix market in the production of it.
Right.
But the acting just like you said, Coco, just took me right out of it. Like, there were some moments where I was just like, I was laughing when I shouldn't have been laughing.
Right, totally.
And I was stunned, and I was like, wait a minute, what does that facial expression mean? Shouldn't he be reacting this way instead? And it just...
And you did mention the production values, which were great. Like, the wardrobe was great, the hair was great, but there were a few times when somebody's lips weren't moving, but they were saying lines of dialogue.
Right, and that's an editing thing.
Yeah, that happened several times, and I was
right.
just like, wait a minute. You could totally tell, too, that somebody spoke it in a booth.
Right,
and
it was dubbed.
It was dubbed, so that was a miss.
Yeah, there was a couple of those editing misses for sure. And there were some things that happened, like this is 8 hours, and this is not
legit 8 hours. It's not 40-minute episodes.
That's what I was just going to say. These are not one of those, leave 40 minutes and then leave 20 minutes for potential commercials in case it goes on commercial TV or whatever. I think this is 58 minutes at least of solid.
I think
video.
The shortest one was 55.
Yeah, and no it didn't seem like there was any thought to shortening it. There was a lot of redundancy. I know that they did it on purpose. It was an effect that they used, but they used some of the same footage over and over again, and eventually it got to be just kind of tiresome. And I was like, this really could have been shorter. I know we reached the halfway point, and we were over the crest of the horizon. We could see it. And we were looking at it. It's like, man, the episodes 5 and 6 that was the longest episodes I think I've ever seen in my life. It's like, oh, we're almost there, but we're not really almost there. We still got 2 more or 3 more episodes. So it was just too bad. I think we both wanted to like this.
Yeah.
The trailer didn't dazzle me, but I thought, well, it's trending on Netflix. Let's watch it and see what all the fuss is about. And I wish that we had not.
Aww.
What else did you think, Coco? I mean, it was nice spending time on the couch with you, beside you in your company, but.
So I actually thought they did a really good job of building tension throughout, especially it was either the 3rd or the 4th episode. I believe it was the 3rd episode where a would-be victim managed to escape.
Yeah.
He managed to steal his passport back and flee Thailand back to France. Yeah, and the last 15 or 20 minutes of that episode where he was stealing his passport, they were finding a different tourist visa because his had expired. He's at the airport. Charles is coming back from Hong Kong that day. So are they going to run into each other at the airport? And then Charles is going to take him back and kill him. I've never wanted somebody to escape in a movie more than I've wanted Dominique to escape. And so and that kind of started a trend. After that, each episode I thought did a really good job of building tension a lot, but it was, the episodes, they did seem long. I think they probably could have all been about 10 to 15 minutes shorter. I didn't mind some of the redundant material because I actually did like that they showed scenes from different characters' perspectives. So you'd see a scene from one character's perspective, and then later in the episode, you'd see that same scene from a different character's perspective. So I actually kind of liked that. You could kind of see, how different people were reacting to things and what happened immediately before and after or whatever. So I enjoyed that.
And when you say perspective, though, it was the same footage.
Yeah, it was the same footage. It
wasn't like you were seeing it from that person's eyes or perspective viewpoint.
It was the same footage. But say the first character you'd see, they would go into an apartment and say, hey, Charles, blah, blah, blah. And Charles would say, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And the first character would say, okay, great. And then leave the apartment and you would follow that character for the rest of the day. But then later in the episode, you'd see that same scene. But then when the first character left, you'd stay in the apartment with Charles. And then you'd hear the conversation that Charles had with Monique and AJ, his Indian sidekick after that. So, so I like
that was good.
I like that. I felt like that kind of brought more kind of balance to it and made it a little bit more well-rounded. The writing, though, I thought was not especially fantastic. I know Daltz will throw me down and punch me in the face for saying this because Daltz...
I'm not a violent person at all.
Because you're Canadian.
Right. Geez, how can I help it?
Because Daltz enjoyed some of the speeches. I thought some of the speechifying was a little cheesy, where Charles was telling AJ that a white girl has colonized him by sleeping with him. And I was rolling my eyes. I was like, oh, is it 5 o'clock? Can I drink yet? Oh.
See, I like that particular speech because I thought it was evidence of how manipulative he could be. That was the manipulation in action. And I like that part of it. I will agree that the dialogue was uneven.
Yeah.
It was inconsistent. I think you could say overall this was inconsistent. It had some really interesting moments, but the bad moments just brought it all the way down. It was like a Spanish soap opera. I mean, it was just up and down and up and down. It just didn't seem to be very evenly written or directed or acted.
And especially the character of Monique. She, 1 minute she's 100% in love with Charles, and the next minute she's thinking about turning him into the cops. And she just, Daltz and I were talking about this in between episodes, and she was just a very inconsistent character. Her characterization was not consistent from minute to minute, let alone episode to episode. So that was kind of, in the beginning, you can see how she got sucked in, and I was like, oh man, she was just as much a victim as everybody else. But then later in that episode, like, she's helping him drug people and stuff, and I'm like, okay, so she's not really that much of a victim. And then she's all like, I'm not a criminal, and I'm like, yeah, you are, girl. Like, you are a criminal, actually.
Well, and I think that the intention there was to show her inner conflict, and she was conflicted, and she wanted to be a good person, and yet she was wrapped up in the talons of this Svengali blah blah blah, except it just didn't happen it happened too abruptly in some ways, and it happened inconsistently. And I know life is messy, and you can be conflicted and do things that are counter to your character. But it just, in this kind of production, it just seemed really odd because you have a lot of time to get to know these people.
Right.
So we didn't have to have these instant moments where she's like, all of a sudden, hey, I'm helping. Hey, I'm not helping. Oh, what am I going to do? Yes, I know what I'm going to do. And there are entries in her diary about Monique, who is the character she adapted, and then Marie, which was her real name.
Right.
That wasn't really used consistently. That would have explained some of the conflict. So I really wanted to like it, and I think on paper it probably would have been pretty good. It would have been a decent script, but it's just not. I just wish we hadn't watched it.
Yeah, we watched the first 2 episodes yesterday when it premiered, and after the second one, I had to go to bed, and Daltz was just like, so what do you think so far? And I was like, oh man, it's really bad. And he was like, oh, thank God, I thought you liked it. And I was so like nervous, and I was like, no, this is really terrible. But I think it rebounded as the episodes went on, but I think that's just because of the story, not because...
The acting didn't get better.
No, the acting did not get better. Although I will give a shout out to Mathilde Warnier, who played Nadine. She was really good. She was a neighbor of Charles who helped Dominique escape and helped the Thai cops raid the apartment. So she did a good job. But
yeah, I agree. I think that, so listener, we, as you probably know, Coco and I have different tastes in movies.
Yes.
And so sometimes we cross over, like the diagram with the 2 circles,
right.
The Venn diagram or whatever it is. Like sometimes we cross over and we both really like something. And so I'm always sitting on the couch going, oh, I don't want to be hating everything we watch. Like, I don't want to be
but
like...
I know you do. That's
always like raining down on Coco's superhero parade. But I was watching this and was like, oh, I wonder what she thinks, because I think this is terrible.
Yeah.
And so I was really relieved. I knew I wasn't going to be sleeping on the couch last night when we both agreed that it started off really horribly, and the acting was you could see the acting, which is always a bad thing. But I agree. I think it rallied a little bit, and we watched the whole thing, so it couldn't have been awful.
Although, to be fair, we watched the whole thing because we were like, this is so bad that this podcast episode is going to be great, because we're going to be just nonstop ripping on it. And I don't feel like we've actually been nonstop ripping on it.
This is for you, listener. We do it all for you. A beautiful sunny day here in the Northeast, and we sat inside all day and watched horrible TV for you.
We did, yeah. So what grade would you give The Serpent?
The Serpent. I would give it probably a 5 out of 10.
Wow. You gave Godzilla vs. Kong a 6 out of 10, and you seemed like you liked that a lot better.
Yeah, I would say 5, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Out of 26 letters, Coco, and then shades of those 26 and
Nuance.
plus and minus, what would you give The Serpent?
I'd give it like a C to C minus.
Wow.
Yeah. It, if it weren't for, like I said, like the tension building, they were very, very good at that throughout the episodes. Yeah. And then the story itself, like you said, was very gripping. Those 2 things kind of saved it, but everything else, I mean, it was just like a bad soap opera. Well,
and we've said this before about other things too, is it's driven by characters' stupid decisions.
Exactly.
Like, there were a lot of times where we were both looking at each other going, just get in the taxi and go to the airport.
Right.
Like,
totally.
it's 1975. They're not going to trace your cell phone. Like, just leave the country.
And then Charles is having a conversation with his first wife at their wedding, and she's like, oh, well, but I don't want to go to India. And I'm like, why didn't you talk about this before you got married? Like, now you're trapped. Like, what?
Way to go.
Yeah,
way to broach that on the night of your wedding.
Right.
So let's go to India. No, about that India thing.
I feel like probably French lady mags back in the 60s had, like French Cosmo probably did have lists of like 25 things to talk about before you get married. And that's probably one of them,
So, like, when Coco and I are leaving for Canada, and she's going to be like, After 27 years together, I don't think I don't really want to go to Canada.
Are you sure you really want to go to Canada? Like, I know that's all you've talked about since we met, but
I don't really like maple syrup. Did I tell you that?
Yeah.
What? This is heartbreaking news.
You know I'm vegan, so I can't eat the poutine, right?
And back bacon is not a thing to me.
Right.
It's like, what?
But love them Mounties.
Well, anyway.
So yeah, C to C minus.
So if you have other choices, listener, I'd say make those choices.
Yeah.
We're going to probably look at some other movies that are hot this weekend. So maybe a movie is a better investment of your time than 8 hours of this thing.
Yeah, this is definitely one. If you're going to watch it, you don't have to watch it now. You can you can watch other stuff that's on your watch list and then get to this later.
Yeah, if you're just watching the hot stuff so you can talk about it online or with your friends if you still have some, this is not the one. Even though it's trending on Netflix and it's the hot property, I think sometimes those numbers get cooked a little bit and they push things out that they want to say is hot because who's really watching an 8-hour debacle like this?
Well, I mean, if they weren't, Netflix wouldn't throw a lot of money at it.
Yeah, but I think they're throwing some heft behind the marketing and saying, "Oh yeah, it's trending."
Well, and Netflix clearly has a lot of money to throw around because they just spent $450 million on like 2 freaking Knives Out sequels, which Knives Out didn't need a sequel. Netflix,
right? With Daniel Craig inexplicably with some sort of Southern accent, like
right?
What is-
some like hammy, over the top Southern accent. I love Daniel Craig, but no.
And it's the same accent he had in Logan and Lucky, I think. So
I didn't watch that.
Why are you playing that same card? I mean, it was great in Logan Lucky, but why in Knives Out? Anyway, we digress.
So before we go too far off the rails, anything else to add?
No, I'd say pass on this one, listener. I'd say try something else, or maybe watch Love It or List It, or Grand
Marriage
Design.
or Mortgage.
Marriage or Mortgage, yes.
Yeah.
Which we also watched, which was a much more entertaining watch. Let me put it that way.
Pop culture, empty calories.
So actually, we were talking about Marriage or Mortgage, and we were joking around saying it was
Marriage or Murder.
So actually, we just watched
Marriage or Murder.
Marriage or Murder.
Totes.
All right. So thanks for putting up with us, listener. We really appreciate it. We're out of here for another week on the podcast. I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dolls.